Laura Gassner Otting, welcome to the Power of Books podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. Actually, we just talked about this before we started the recording. Your book is due to release tomorrow, actually, on the day we're recording this. So that's really exciting. And your new book is called Wonderhell. And the first thing, obviously, that people might think when they hear the title is, what does that even mean? What is Wonderhell?
Yeah, so you know that moment where you've accomplished something you weren't quite sure that you could do. Maybe you sold your first consulting contract. Maybe you ran a 10K and you'd never run more than 5K before. Maybe you subbed in for your boss on a presentation and you're like, ooh, I kind of like that limelight, right? Maybe I want to do it. There's this moment that we have where we achieve something we don't think is possible. And in that moment, it's like, that's exciting. It's amazing. It's humbling. It's wonderful. But also in that moment, we see a version of ourselves. You see ourselves selling more work, running a half marathon, maybe doing the presentations all the time. And we're like, ooh, maybe I want to see if I could do it, right? So it's amazing, it's exciting, it's humbling. But also when the burden of potential sits itself down on your shoulders, you also start to feel stress and anxiety and uncertainty and doubt and imposter syndrome and burnout and all of these emotions. It's wonderful, but it's also hell. It's kind of Wonderhell. And so Wonderhell is all about why that moment of success doesn't feel like we thought it would feel and what we should do about it.
That's really interesting. And I'm curious, do you have like a biggest Wonderhell moment that you've experienced in your life? Or?
I mean, I have lots of Wonderhell moments that I've experienced because what I learned about Wonderhell is that it actually loves itself a repeat visitor. We actually end up coming back to Wonderhell every time we push towards a different part of our journey. But one of my favorite Wonderhell moments was when my last business, an executive search firm, was about 4 years old. And I got the call of every entrepreneur's dreams. I got that call of like, hi, Laura, we've been watching you. We like what you're up to. And would you ever consider getting acquired? We'd like to buy your business. And I will tell you, I was counting my money before I even hung up the phone. I was like, woohoo, I've done it. It's like the perfect thing. So then I got all like gussied up and I had like 2 small children and I hadn't worn pantyhose in like 20 years, but I like went to the department store and I tried to figure out what pair of pantyhose would like fit on my body after I'd had babies. Like I was like, what am I even doing? And I put on like the blue suit and I went downtown and I walked into this very fancy downtown office where there was this old white dude who didn't look like me, didn't think like me, didn't talk like me, didn't act like me. And he kind of gave me that sort of like mild condescension that you get from like typically like the older generations that are like, yo, isn't that cute what you've done? And he was telling me all about all the ways that his big firm would take my little firm to the place where it really belonged, right? To fulfill its full potential. And I remember thinking in that moment, well, if he thinks he can do it, why can't I just do it? And there was this moment where he like slides the piece of paper across the glass table to me that's going to have the number, right, that he was going to buy my firm for. And I looked at the piece of paper and all I could see through the glass table were my legs in those pantyhose. And I was like, I can't believe I'm wearing pantyhose. Like, what am I even doing? Like, I wore pantyhose to go sell my soul to its first suitor. I don't even want a suitor. And I took the piece of paper and I just pushed it right back across the table. And I was like, you know what? I think maybe I'll be the one to take my firm to the place where it belongs. And I didn't even open the piece of paper. Years later, I'm like, I really wonder what that piece of paper said. But that was the moment where I was like, well, if he thinks I can do it, why can't I be the one to do it? And that was, I think, was my first real like Wonderhell moment.
That's such a great story, and it's a very bold move because, in the first place, you probably thought about, selling your business because otherwise you wouldn't have gone to the meeting. But then being in that moment and just pushing the paper back, that's kind of hilarious, but also very bold and inspiring.
Yeah, and, it's really funny because part of me is like, I should get back in touch with them. Like, I would love to know what the number was, but it's either going to be a number that was so big that I'm going to be like, what was I thinking? Or it's going to be a number that was so small that I'm going to have rage, just rage, like historic rage. So I'm like, how could they insult me like that? But I think that happens a lot where we have these moments where people see in us something, even if so Wonderhell happens when you see that version of yourself. amazing. But sometimes you can't see it. Sometimes it takes a mentor or a coach or a suitor or somebody to be able to say like, you're actually better at this than you think. Like you could do more. Maybe you should apply for the promotion. Maybe you should sign up for the race. Sometimes we need that other person to see our wonder.
Totally right. Yeah, I get it. So, and one thing you mentioned briefly was that Wonderhell is what, like in the moment of Wonderhell, you kind of see the burden of potential, like realizing your own potential. And I'm curious because, realizing your own potential and seeing it is the one thing and the first thing, but then like, what do you think holds people back the most for actually achieving their potential, actually fulfilling it?
Well, I think the first thing is that we don't believe it, right? So we see this vision of ourselves and then we're like, no, I can't do that. That's not for me. That's reserved for somebody else. And we don't believe we can do it. And then the next thing is then we get all these confirming voices in our heads, right? And sometimes those voices are in our heads. Sometimes those voices are right outside of our head, right? Sometimes there are people that love you and they don't want to see you get hurt. So they're like, no, don't take the risk. Sometimes there are people who are jealous and they only see your rise through the lens of their own stagnation. So, you kind of get like a little tepid response. Sometimes there are people who are just scared and they'll be like, oh, I don't know, maybe you shouldn't do that. That's too scary. When really what they mean is maybe I shouldn't do that. I'm too scared. But yet we hear all of these voices and we plant them in our garden and we fertilize them and we give them all the same sun and we let them all grow to the same height, right? We give all these people votes in our lives who shouldn't even have voices. So I think that when I found myself in Wonderhell, the next Wonderhell after my last book came out, and I was like, it debuted at number 2 on the Washington Post bestseller list. How do I get to number 1? What about the New York Times? Like, someone's got to be under the oak tree with Oprah. Like, why not me? She got to talk to someone, right? And I had all these imaginations of like what it could be. I was so stuck in this moment. So I started talking to other authors that I knew and then other speakers that I knew. And then that, it blossomed into talking to 100 different glass ceiling shatterers and Olympic medalists and startup unicorns, because I thought they'd be able to help me figure out a way out. And what I learned from them is that there's no way out. There's just a way to actually look forward to it, to enjoy it, to plan for it, to learn from it. Because on the other side of every Wonderhell we have is just the next one and the next one. If we're lucky, the next one after that. And so one of the things what these people did is they did 3 things. The first was they learned to embrace their ambition. They were like, you know what? I want to be under the oak tree with Oprah. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to own that. I'm going to make that like, why not? Why not me? It's got to be someone. Number 1. Number 2, all these voices, the slings and arrows and the pain points and the uncertainty, all the tsunami of emotions, they didn't see them as limitations. They saw them as invitations. That all of these good, bad, and ugly complex emotions were not slings and arrows to be absorbed and to be swallowed down and to suffer through, but these were actually incredibly helpful allies that show us that we're on the right track. And then the last thing that they did is they never said, okay, I'm done. Success is not a finite destination. Success is just the next place. It's not an endpoint, but it's a waypoint. So I need to know that I'm always going to have to learn how to continue being comfortable, being uncomfortable, because as I said, this is a cyclical journey. On the other side of this one is just the next one and the next one and the next one.
Yeah, so that's also something you cover, that every time you get to the next step, you're in the situation again, where everything is new, you don't know what you do, it's uncertainty, it's like imposter syndrome kicks in. So I wonder, how do you deal with first of all uncertainty, like when you have to do new things, you're not sure whether the outcome will be what you expect it to be or what you want it to be, and then like secondly, like how do you deal with imposter syndrome, not feeling like you are where you're supposed to be, basically?
Yeah. So, the book is organized as an amusement park. Because, just like we thought success was going to be fun. And then you get there and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't fun. It's actually harder. There's a faster pace. I have a bigger hunger. Like, it's actually gotten harder. Amusement parks are kind of the same way. Like, you think you're going to go to all the towns, go on all the rides. It's going to be amazing. And then it's 3:00 in the afternoon and the sun is beating down on you and you're like a little sunburn and that, corn dog in your stomach and the beer you've had is maybe threatening to make an exit on the roller coaster that you don't even want to go on, but you're in that ride. And you're like, I thought this was going to be fun. fun. So I feel like success is a little bit the same way. So Wonderhell is organized as an amusement park, and there's 3 towns: Imposter Town, Doubtsville, and Burnout City. So the first town, the first third of the book really talks about imposter syndrome and what do we do when we find ourselves in this place. And I mean, let's just talk about the term imposter syndrome itself, like the gall of the term imposter syndrome. Like, oh, you're an imposter. You don't belong here. Maybe you should leave. You have a syndrome. Are you sick? Perhaps you should lie down, right? So the whole idea of the term imposter syndrome says there's something wrong with the person who has it. And it never points the finger at the environment in which they are, the environment that wasn't built for people who look like them, think like them, act like them. Think about the guy who was wanting to buy my business. I felt like an imposter sitting in his office because there was nothing in that office that looked like me or represented me or, was a home for me. So I didn't see myself moving forward because it didn't make any sense. So this imposter syndrome idea, we have to stop saying that there is something wrong with us for doing it, but maybe start congratulating ourselves for getting ourselves into a room that wasn't built to welcome people like us. It's not, oh my God, I haven't done this before. It's, oh my God, I haven't done this before. And so the people that I spoke to who thrived in Wonderhell were able to turn that imposter syndrome around and not see it as a limitation, but to see it as an invitation. Then you also asked about uncertainty. In the Doubtsville part of the book, I talk about uncertainty, and that's sort of the roller coaster ride. That's all the emotions have different rides that are attached to them. And one of the people that I profile in the book is a woman by the name of Carrie Lorenz. And Carrie Lorenz was the first female F-14 fighter pilot in the U.S. Navy. Kind of a badass, right? She gets on stage, she's 6 foot tall, she wears leather from head to toe, and she tells you the story about how you land like a $2 billion fighter jet on a tiny postage stamp of a rollicking, rolling aircraft carrier in the middle of an ocean, when, by the way, the average age of the sailor on that boat is 19 years old. Right? So wow. You have 1.7 seconds to go from twice the speed of the average roller coaster to a dead stop, and you're counting on a 19-year-old to help you do it. Okay, kind of terrifying. And what she said is that there are 3 things. There are 3 things that we can focus on at any given time. And it's something like meatball, angle, line of attack. And that's it. All you're doing when you're trying to land that plane is meatball, angle, line of attack. How are you going to do it? And she said when the pandemic hit, she knew that she had to go back to that thing. 3 things. What is in your span of control? She focused on family, fitness, and finances. Everything else that didn't include family, fitness, and finances, she pushed aside. What is in your span of control and what is not? So I was talking to a friend this morning who was about to run the Boston Marathon, and he's like, I've done all the work. I've done all the training. I did the last final training run, and now I'm just tapering. And there's nothing I can do. I mean, is it going to be 105 degrees on Marathon Monday? Is it going to be 30 degrees and sleeting? Who knows? It's Boston. And I said, all you can do is focus on what you can do. You focused on the process. You did the work. You had the habits. All you can do from now until the marathon 2 weeks from now is focus on focus on not getting injured, focus on, stretching, mobility, hydration, nutrition. If you eat a bag of potato chips and drink 4 beers every night, you're going to have a bad marathon. What is in your span of control? So when everything is uncertain, there are things we can control and there are things we cannot control. So double down on what you can control and don't worry about the rest.
That's a really good point. Yeah, especially the last one. Because I think many people, when they go on a new job or entrepreneurial journey or start a new project, what they want in terms of certainty or uncertainties, they would like to know that the outcome is 100% certain. They would like that if they focus on the controllables, as you said, the outcome is given. But that's actually not the case, in many cases, because you can't make sure that the outcome will come. You can only focus on the controllables. So in that sense, I guess you've also had that when you started your entrepreneurial journey, because as you said, you eventually ended up selling the search firm that you built, and then started another business, and you always took these leaps of faith, kind of first from being an employee to then starting your own business. And I wonder, because in those situations, you also weren't certain that, the search firm would be successful, or after that, your new business would be successful. So how did you make sure not to let that hold yourself back from taking the leap?
Yeah. I could probably give you an answer that tells you all the reasons why I knew for sure things would work and how I made strategic and thoughtful and planful and but I'd be lying. I'd be lying. A lot of times I made the leap because I couldn't not make the leap. It was either too exciting, it was too interesting, an opportunity I couldn't pass away was there, or maybe I was just running away from the thing that I was doing before that was just so awful I had to do something else. Let me tell you another story. I interviewed a woman named Dory Clark for the book, and Dory is a New York, or she's a Wall Street Journal bestselling author. She's a business professor at one of the top business schools in the United States. She writes books about reinventing you is one of her books, like reinventing yourself. So she's all about leadership, all about reinvention. And interestingly enough, she is right now in the middle of her own reinvention because she decided that in addition to doing all this on the side, she wants to learn how to score Broadway musicals. She wants to write a Broadway musical. Amazing, right? So she signs up for this program, one of the best programs in the country where you can learn how to do this. And she gets immediately rejected and ends up, applying, and finally gets in. On the very first day, she's in the room and everyone's going around the table introducing themselves. And this one's written 2 musicals and that one's won a Tony Award. And this one's, done 16 other different things. And she's like, I could have sat there in that moment and put up my hoodie and gone, oh my God, and shrunk out of the room and said, I've only got 3 songs. I've written 3 whole songs. Or I could say, Dory, everything that got you to here isn't going to get you to there. But at every time in your career where you've tried to learn something new, you've figured it out. You've created a system, you've created a process, you've learned how to ask the right questions, you've learned how to surround yourself with people who can help you get there. So even if you don't know what to do over there, you understand how to create a process that's going to help you get there. It's not that you're not good at writing Broadway musicals, you're just not good yet at writing Broadway musicals. And I think that ability to say to ourselves that just because we want to, look, I mean, the only things I've ever wanted to do that have ever interested me are things that I've no qualifications for. That's why they're interesting. If I'd done them already, they wouldn't be interesting anymore, right? So we are constantly finding ourselves in this Wonderhell moment in between who we were yesterday and who we want to become and just realize we can become tomorrow. So the only way to walk confidently towards the tomorrow is to say, well, I've survived all my worst days so far. All of my failures haven't been finale, they've been fulcrum. I've been able to grow and learn and iterate and innovate and change. I can still do that just in this other milieu.
Yeah, so it's a lot about the confidence and belief that you have the abilities to learn anything, that's new, or basically master anything that's new and build, as you said, the systems, the processes. And that's really interesting because it touches on one subject that I wanted to talk about anyway, which is in the book you call it borrowed confidence. And I really love that because you talk about the alter ego effect as well by Todd Herman, and then how you created your own alter ego with LGO, which also explains your Instagram handle and everything. So I really love that, and I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that. Like, what does your alter ego look like for you, and do you have any triggers to step into it, or how it works for you?
Yeah, so my name is Laura Gassner Otting. It's a lot of names, so everyone calls me LGO. People have called me LGO for 20 years, and I am Laura, a raging introvert who would love to just sit in my house and write books and snuggle my dogs and my kids and my husband and never talk to strangers. That would be dreamy for me. But I make my living as a keynote speaker and a media, guest media personality. So my job, I only get paid when I talk to strangers. So I have to talk to strangers. That's, part and parcel of my job, which is amazing. And it's an incredible privilege that anybody wants to listen to me talk or, read my books or, listen to podcasts I'm on or any of that. But part of my job means that I get hired to go speak in front of 5,000 people, 10,000 people. And you can't play small. You can't be introverted when you do that. And so my last book, Limitless, is bright yellow. And a dear friend of mine was like, Laura, listen, you always post about these celebrities and their hashtag Limitless Yellow. How come you never wear yellow on stage? And I was like, because I hate yellow and I don't look good in yellow and I don't want to wear yellow. And she's like, all right, it's time. You got to do it. You got to do it. So not only that, she also said, and you need to tell the story of when you were really sick. Now, in 2021, I was so sick that I actually didn't know if I was going to see 2022. And I never told that story publicly. I hadn't done it. I hadn't done it before the pandemic, obviously. And then as we were coming out of the pandemic, I didn't know how or if I should. And she was like, trust me, you need to do it. So she had referred me to a speech that I was giving, and it's 5,000 people in Dallas. This is the group of people who it's a networking marketing group that they sell caffeine patches that you put on your arm, slow release caffeine patches that you wear all day long and you put on your arm. So I'm walking into this arena, 5,000 heavily caffeinated people who, and it's like the voice of God comes over. Welcome to the stage, Laura Gassner Otting. It was just like, let's get ready to rumble. And I stride out onto stage for the first time ever wearing head to toe bright yellow, knowing I'm going to open with the story of being super sick. And I am terrified, but the music is pumping and they're, let's welcome to the stage, and everyone's screaming. And I walk out and I throw my arms open. I go, hello, Dallas. And the crowd roared. And because they roared, I went, whoa, and I roared back. And then they roared back. And I was like, oh my God. And I felt amazing. And for the next 59 minutes, I preached. I was up there. I was on fire, standing ovations. It was amazing. And what I realized from that is that I didn't have to have what I thought I needed, which was 60 minutes of confidence and courage to get up on stage and do that. I didn't need that. I only needed 60 seconds of confidence and courage, because they gave me their love, so I gave them my love back. They gave me their courage, so I gave them my courage back. And it became this incredible energy force field where we were just absolutely feeding into each other. And, we all get so scared and we're like, I don't know if I can do the thing. The hard thing about doing hard things isn't the hard. It's just the do. It's the starting, right? It's just the starting. And as you get started, you start feeling the energy and the momentum and the family, the combination of friends and family that should be around you to help you get to where you want to get to. And so for me, that really became the sort of LGO on stage. And so now when I walk out onto stage, I just embody that person that walked out, 2 years ago onto that stage in Dallas and was like, hello, Dallas.
That's such a cool story. I love that. And did Limitless Yellow, did you end up liking the color and wearing it, or still not?
It's funny. So I then wore Limitless Yellow every time I spoke after that. That's and cool. When I went to go do Good Morning America in January, I walked out of the elevator. The producer's like, what? You're not wearing Limitless Yellow? So it's become a thing. But now I had to make a decision, is Wonderhell yellow or not? But if Wonderhell's yellow, then my kids were like, you're never going to ever be able to not wear yellow for the rest of your life. So Wonderhell is blue, but what's really fun about it is that inside the book, the dust jacket, the book itself is actually yellow. So it's a little Easter egg, a little homage to Limitless. So now I have to decide if I'm going to, still wear yellow on stage or not. But it's funny because, this whole idea of the alter ego is it's pretty basic, right? Who are you when you are the very best version of yourself? When you are crushing it, you're making it rain, you are just absolutely on fire. And maybe it's this loud, brash thing in front of 5,000 people. Maybe it's you helping a loved one or a colleague quietly through a really hard moment. Maybe you're putting together a presentation where nobody sees you. It's in the dark. You're all alone. It doesn't have to be a big public screamy thing. It could be a quiet, private, really meaningful moment. But who are you when you're your very best version of yourself? And how do you figure out how to embody that person? For me, it's standing backstage and remembering, being expansive, being open, being vulnerable, living in the moment, having joy. When I'm that person, when I'm LGO, my confidence is so contagious. It's infectious. People love it. if I walked out on stage and I was like, hello, Dallas, I'm so happy to be here. Like nobody would care. Like they'd be like, oh, good, it's time for me to take a bathroom break, right? So figuring out who you are when you're the very best version of you, and then just, it's not fake it till you make it. You're just being the same version. You're not faking it because you already are that person. You're just doing it intentionally enough times so that it becomes muscle memory.
Right. Yeah, I love the point that you made. It's not like stepping into a different person because you are that. You just, maybe you're not that all the time, but in that scenario, in that moment, you unleash it. So
yes.
when you step on stage, do you have like some kind of pre-game ritual, quote unquote, or something that gets you into that state before you step on stage, or does that just happen naturally now?
I don't drink coffee normally, so I usually have coffee the morning before I speak. So that's like, I am awake, I am up. But I honestly, I tend to stand backstage and look at the audience. And I know like a lot of people are like, oh, that sounds terrifying. Like, how scary. Like you're looking at, but I look at them and I think to myself, like, these people are here because they believe in this company or this mission or themselves. And they're here because they want to learn and they want to get better and they want to grow. And I've spent 30 years of my career learning some things that maybe they need. Like, I know that I'm of service to the audience. I know that I'm there. So, speaking in public is scary because you're in the limelight, you're in the spotlight. But if you think about your audience as being the star, and it's just your job, you're just the messenger, right? For their starlight, for their spotlight. For me, that kind of makes me less nervous. It sort of reminds me why I'm there.
That's brilliant. Yeah, because you realize it's not about you or like you making any small mistakes or maybe say a wrong word or anything, because that's not what matters. As you said, it's about providing value to the audience. So that's really exciting. Oh,
and in everything we do, if you think about why you're doing the thing you're doing, who you're doing it for, it actually makes you better at the thing you're doing.
Right. Yeah. And like most of the time we worry so much about what other people might think, and like a second later or a minute later, most of them have already forgotten, or basically everyone has already forgotten about what you did wrong or what, you thought was.
Well, they've forgotten about you also. My favorite Eleanor Roosevelt quote is, we would worry much less about what other people thought about us if we realized how seldomly they did.
That's a great quote. Yeah, I love that. So I wanted to touch on that actually, because it really resonated with me when you said that, we tell ourselves the lie that people in our life won't like us when we are who we really want to be. And, I had that fear when I started my Instagram page, sharing books I read, reviewing the books. I was like, well, what if people think I'm like stupid for doing that or whatever, I want to be influencer or whatever, And in fact, it was so bad that for the first 1 or 2 years, literally nobody I knew about the page I had.
Wow.
And like even 4 years into it, some of my family members still didn't know that I had it or was doing it when I had like 50,000 followers, but my family still didn't know what I was doing. And then at some point I realized, it was holding me back so much because I felt that I was kind of hiding myself in some situations, and that was just holding me back so much from actually, growing this thing and, getting everything, like fulfilling the potential of the project and the business and everything. So yeah, the quote was great. And like, do you have any other things, any tools, or how do you deal with like what other people think about you, the fear of that?
Well, so I try to remind myself a lot that we tend in our lives to give votes to people who shouldn't even have voices, right? There are people who come up to us and they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you're doing that thing. That's so scary. Maybe you shouldn't do it. And what they really mean is, I could never do it. Right? Like maybe I'm too scared. Maybe I could never do it. But yet we hear that and we're like, oh, maybe they're right. Maybe this random person I haven't known since middle school knows me and they're right. Or maybe we listen to our parents And the last time I lived in the same house as my parents, I was 17 years old. I brought the car back late for curfew with the radio turned all the way up, but the gas tank turned all the way down, right? Like, so when I told them I was going to sell my company, or I was going to leave, I was working in the White House, I'm leaving the White House to start a company, or I'm going to drop out of law school to go to the White House. Like, they thought I was insane. And, you know, because they didn't, like, they had my best interest at heart, but they didn't know my heart. They didn't know who I really was. It's been 35 years since I lived in the same house as my family, and yet they still have opinions about who I should be and how I should be, and God forbid what I can't be. The truth is they just don't know me. They don't know what I'm capable of. And then there's these other people in our lives who, like, you know, they only see our rise through the lens of their own stagnation. And so you get a lot of like smiles in the front, knives in the back. So, you know, there are a lot of people who have a lot of opinions about us. And I think that, you know, what's that expression? Like everyone else's, other people's opinions are none of my business. You know, I think that's a really important thing to remember. So what do? I think about whose opinions do I actually want? Like whose praise would mean a lot to me? Those are the same people whose criticism I'd actually want to take. But if you're getting criticism and you're getting shade and you're getting doubt and you're getting this sort of like, you know, all these voices in your ear from people who, like, if they told you you're doing a great job, you'd be like, oh, great. But it wouldn't mean that much to you. You got to like turn the volume down on those people for sure. So, you know, I'm very careful about whose opinions I take. And I've also learned to be very good at saying, when somebody said, can I give you some advice? And I'm like, nope. Nope. That's it. No, thank you. I'm all good. That's fine too.
I love that. Yeah. And as you said that, I was just thinking about, you know, most of the people I worried about what they might think. I wouldn't take their advice, you know, I wouldn't care if they said, you know, it's great. It wouldn't really matter. So that's really a great filter to apply.
Yes.
I love that.
And the problem is that we still hear all their criticism and we take it and we plant them in the garden in the same way, right? And we give all their votes, all the same sunshine. You know, I had another friend of mine who's a writer just posted something on Facebook this morning. And he said, what do you do with criticism? I sent my manuscript out to 100 people and I got some great feedback. People loved it. And then I got some that I just can't get out of my mind, some really negative stuff. And now I'm wondering if I should just put the manuscript in the trash. And I said to him, I was like, well, who are those people? Like, I write personal development and self-help books. I have friends who are academics who write about academic leadership. They read my manuscript. They didn't love it. They liked it because they like me, but they didn't love it because it's not their stuff. But my newsletter writers, I have 20,000 newsletter readers who read my stuff every single week. Those people read my manuscript and they could not wait to buy the book, right? So like,
yes.
Whose advice am I going to take? I love my academic leadership writing friends. They're amazing, but they're not my target audience. They're not the people who I want to love the book. So like everyone's opinion should not be considered equal.
That's a great example because, as you said, you know, academic writing might be a lot different than, you know, what the books you're writing, and your friends might not be the people who end up reading your book, you know. So
I mean, my readers would hate these academic leadership books, and that's fine, right? I mean, like, you know, my grandfather used to say, that's why there's chocolate and that's why there's vanilla, right? Like everybody gets to choose what they want to choose, and you don't have to be for everyone. But you need to figure out who your people are and be 100% for them.
That's great. Yeah, I love that. And then just take the feedback, the criticism from them. You know, if it's from them, then it's actually worth something. You know, then you should consider it and like fix the things that they might critique. Yeah, right.
Yes.
Interesting. So to get to Burnout City, I want to talk a little bit about prioritizing because, you know, obviously you can't do everything. That's where burnout comes into play. You talk a little bit about hustle culture and stuff like that, and that we can't put all the stuff on our plates because we just have like limited time, obviously. And what's your like biggest thing that your biggest strategy to prioritize and make sure that, you know, you don't overwork yourself?
So my biggest strategy is to figure out where you are important. And to know where you're not that important. The best piece of personal or professional advice I ever got in my life was, Laura, you're just not that important. And at the time, I thought I was super important. I had a young family. I had a growing business. I was involved in my community. I'm like, I have to show up for everybody all the time. And the woman who gave me this advice basically was like, if you're picking up your kids from school 3 days a week so that you can be the greatest mom ever and taking them to the parks, you can be the greatest mom ever, and then coming home and making dinner so you can be the greatest mom ever. But the whole time you're on your cell phone with your office so that you can be the greatest boss ever and the greatest, client service manager ever. And you're not being good for either of them, right? You're not showing up for, like, everybody knows that you're not entirely there. So all you're doing is running yourself ragged. And she said, when you walk into school and somebody says, would you chair the bake sale, or you promise your client that you're going to get them the contract tomorrow when really you get it to them in 2 days, like, think about where you are that important and where you're not. And what she was saying to me is there are moments like when I pick up my kids, I should be able to spend an hour with them at the end of the day and just be fully present for them. There are moments where my clients need me to be 100% fully laser focused on their problem. But when I was trying to be super important to all people at all times and I was failing everybody, all I was doing was serving my own ego, my own need to be important. And so what I would say is figure out where you are that important. What is the highest and best use of your time? What can nobody else do but you? And double down there. And the rest of it, learn how to delegate or let go of.
That's great. It's a different perspective than what you usually read or hear somewhere else. So that's why I think it's really interesting, because we play a lot of different roles in life, and we kind of need to find a balance between all these roles. And as you said, finding out where you are the most important at that moment. That's a great takeaway. One other thing you talk about in the Burnout City chapter, which, by the way, I love the way your book is structured, which you quickly said it's structured in the way of amusement park, and it's great that you name all the chapters, by different rides and stuff like that. And I realized that it also makes things a lot easier to remember, because it's like an analogy or something, like a mental bridge to remember things. So I love that, and it's fun to read that way.
Yes. Well, we're actually creating a quiz at wonderhellquiz.com where you can answer 15 questions, and it'll tell you like what ride you're on right now and what rides are coming up. So it's really fun to be able to work with a differently organized self-help book.
True. Is that quiz already live, or do you know when it will be live?
It'll be live tomorrow. So by the time this podcast comes out, it will absolutely be live.
Great. So there was wonderhell.quiz, right? In case
wonderhellquiz.com.
Oh, okay. Right. So in that chapter, you talk about also the hedonic treadmill, and because you said that obviously the Wonderhell moment, success isn't finite. There's always like a next level, a next step. But how can we make sure not to get lost in this treadmill, where we try to constantly keep up with the Joneses, buy new things, get new stuff, step up our social game or whatever. Like, how can we escape that treadmill?
Yeah. So, I mean, this hedonic treadmill is like this idea is, 50 years old or something, that says that every time we achieve something, we're like, oh, what about the next thing? Well, what about the next thing? Like I got a new car. What about a fancier car? What about the fanciest car? Like each time we keep wanting the next thing. So, it's very important for us to ask ourselves at every age and every life stage, what is important to us? What does success mean to us? So the example that I use in the book is, if you finally were able to join the country club, amazing. But when you're at the country club, you look across the street and you're like, there's a nicer country club. And how do I get to that one? And then you're at the nicer country club and you're like, oh, but all these other people are at the country club down by the ocean. How do I get to that one? And you end up working so hard to try to keep upping what you're doing, that the only time you see that super fancy country club is when your kids post a picture from the pool on Instagram, and it's like, lucky them, not so lucky you, right? So if the reason you wanted to join the country club in the first place was that you could have great weekends by the pool with your family, then if you've got the great weekends by the pool with your family, then maybe it's enough. So the question is, what does success mean to me? Do I want to be pursuing these things because I actually want them? Look, we can't be insatiably hungry for someone else's goals. So if you're looking on Instagram and all you're seeing are like fancy house, fancy car, fancy plane, fancy vacation, fancy clothes, fancy jewelry, you're like, oh, that must be the definition of success. But if you're not the kind of person who wants that sort of stuff, then you can achieve and you can keep running on the treadmill and keep grabbing the next thing that you think is going to make you happy. But studies show that those things don't make us happy for very long unless they're things that mean something to us. So we have to keep asking ourselves that question of, why do I want this? What will having this thing get me? And will having that thing actually give me the satisfaction, the fulfillment that I want in my life? And often the answer is no. Because the next question is, well, is it worth the sacrifice then to go there?
Yeah, we essentially hold ourselves back from enjoying what we currently have by focusing on what we want next. And
we let the wants get in the way of the haves.
Right. Yeah, that put it very briefly and on the point. I love that. So to kind of wrap it up, I have 2 more shorter questions for you. Actually, the first one is a little hard probably, but I'm curious to hear your answer. And this is originated from a content format I tried on Instagram, where I basically summarize books in 1 sentence. Obviously, you can't summarize all the contents in 1 sentence, but it's kind of it could either be a fun way of putting it or maybe like a main message or main idea. And I'm curious, how would you summarize Wonderhell in 1 sentence?
How would I summarize it in 1 sentence? I would say how to embrace the burden of your potential and actually enjoy the ride.
I love that. That's great. And the people will get the answers in the book for sure.
People will get the answers in the book for sure. Yes.
And then the last question for you, because as a writer and author, and people who write also read a lot. And since the show is called The Power of Books, I ask everyone who's on what books have impacted their lives the most. You can name however many you want.
Gosh, wow, that's such a good question. I mean, I can tell you that The Jungle by Upton Sinclair made me a progressive Democrat. I can tell you that Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy O'Toole made me realize that you can be smart and funny at the same time. My husband, on our first anniversary of dating, gave me the Fagles translation of the Iliad and the Odyssey, which, I mean, how cute that he thought I was smart enough to read those. But there have been books that as I've read them have just stayed in my soul and in my core. Gretchen Rubin's Happiness Project was a book that I read at a time where I was like, I don't know. I mean, my life is fine. I have a lot of privilege. Why aren't I happy? And she writes in the very first page of those books, I'm a rich white lady living in New York City. What do I have to complain about? Why did I have to go on a project to make myself happy? And I was like, oh my God, she owned it. She owned who she was. And so there are just a number of books that as I read them, I was like, oh, that makes sense of who this person inside of me is that hasn't figured out yet how to express herself.
That's really interesting. And I haven't heard of the first 2, so I gotta look them up afterwards.
Yes, the Confederacy of Dunces and The Jungle. I mean, they're very old books, but they, I mean, there's certain books that you read at certain times in your life that are just game changing, and people are always like, oh, I need to find a mentor. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Find a library card. There are so many mentors in books. I spend all my time writing everything I know into a book. I could just hand you it. It's a much more efficient way.
Exactly. Yeah, you can teach way more in the book, which is just a few bucks for people. And
yes.
you put decades into it, that's more value than you could ever tell them in a conversation of 1 hour or 2, sitting down with them for dinner or lunch or whatever.
Absolutely.
So, totally. And I appreciate it that you put the value in the book and that we talked about it today. And thanks for coming on. where can people, or what's the best place for people to go to when they want to check out more of your stuff or follow you?
Yeah. So as you said, my name is Laura Gassner Otting. My Instagram handle, all my social handles are Hey LGO, like HEYLGO. So you can find me anywhere on social at Hey LGO. You can check out the book at wonderhell.com. And if you want to take the quiz and figure out if you're in Imposter Town, Doubtsville, Burnout City, and what ride you're on and how to get off of it, you can go to wonderhellquiz.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Laura, and I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much. It was great.
Thanks. Bye-bye.